is just start this recording so we've got it for posterity. But the whole point of this is that I'm going to be presenting and I'm going to be showing you some really good strategies for building your audience. The important thing is you can ask questions because we're live. And today I'm joined by Radio.co's very own Mike Consolo. Mike, are you there?
Hi, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like one of those satellite links from back in sort of the 80s or something like that.
Cool. As long as I'm coming through loud and clear, that's good.
Yeah. Can everybody hear Mike? Because he's going to be operating the chat as well. So we've got the chat box. If you notice on the panel on the right, you've got chat, you've got questions. So that's how you can ask questions. Because obviously, if everybody could speak, it would sound crazy, I guess. Yeah, that's
yeah.
So, Mike, do you just want to explain a little bit about what you do at Radio.co?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'm the marketing manager at Radio.co. So I work with all of our great stations, and I help them get online. I help them broadcast, and I work with the team, and we create a lot of content around helping people get better at their radio stations, really.
Yes, exactly, and that's essentially what we want to do today. Now, one of the reasons that we need two people to do this is I want to have this presentation full screen, but if I have it full screen, I can't see the chat box, as you can imagine, which is really frustrating. But I don't want to keep it like in a corner of the screen because some of you I know are actually on mobile devices, so that would just make things super awkward. So, Mike, if you see a question that's relevant for me, obviously I'm not going to see it. You just stop me at any point and just say, hey, Steve, I've got a really good question, come in. And that way we should be able to cover everything because, one of the points of doing a live webinar versus just us recording a video is that we can get some feedback. We can explain some points more. We can answer some questions. So, Mike, can you let me know if people can see my screen? They should see a screen with a presentation page on saying radio audiences, listener magnets, how to find them, build them, keep them.
Yeah, well, I can see that, yeah.
Let's just make sure a few more can, because I know that this graphically can be a little difficult for GoToWebinar because it's expecting its little control panel to be there, and obviously I've just pushed it off the screen.
Cool. Just one moment.
Hey, Mike, is everything okay there?
Yeah, everything's fine, Steve. Yeah, I think everyone can see. Yeah. There's a couple of people that I think might be having an issue, but I don't know if that's the vast majority of people are connected and can see. Yeah. So for the few people that can't see, I'll send you a message now and I'll help you.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, guys, so we've got through. It's taken us about 7 minutes. I really appreciate your time. Okay, somebody said earlier, time is money in the radio industry, and that's incredibly true. So let's get started with the presentation, okay? For those of you who'd already tuned in just before we went live on the screen, my name's Steve Ben, and I've been lucky enough for over a decade to work as a marketing consultant. A lot of that has been in internet radio. Specifically, I've worked with the team at Wave Streaming and Radio.co. And as you've already heard today, I've teamed up with Radio.co's Mike Consolo to bring you this very special presentation on how to build your audience. Now, we actually have an awful lot of strategies here at Radio.co that you can use to really boost your audience in ways that perhaps are unexpected. So today we're not going to be talking about things like let's flood Pinterest or Instagram with images. It's not going to be anything like that. We've got something much more fundamental for you. And like I said, I think Mike's the perfect person to be joining me on this because he's obviously so focused on actually helping people out of the station, figuring out how to take it on board. I'm assuming everybody here, by the way, does actually have an internet radio station. And the reason that I ask that is for the next hour, we're going to be looking at the power of internet radio and how to build a sustainable audience. Mike, I don't know if you've got any statistics on this, but do you know what sort of the average audience figures are for most radio stations, what I call the 99%?
On our networks, or
Just
on the
just
in the
generally,
kind
to
of
be honest.
wider.
If you don't,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
I
good.
think
But
I don't actually. If I'm to hand.
I can imagine, though, from what I've seen, we're talking in hundreds of people at the most.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, I think that's definitely kind of a good average to work to.
Yeah, one of the things we see is an awful lot of people start up an internet radio station and they get stuck at a certain level, some higher than others. So what we're going to be looking at is how to boost those audience numbers. Now, one thing I want to just mention is, okay, myself and Mike, we're not really here to answer technical questions about your Radio.co or wave streaming account, or technical things on recording techniques, etc., sound imaging. This is solely about audiences. And the reason for that is we just get waylaid with other things, and we've got a lot to share with you. So why today matters. Okay, we've got this little graph here, and if you just look since 2008, how much internet radio has grown. Okay, we're coming to 2015 on this graph, 47%. Okay, of radio listeners listening to internet radio. Now, when you think about it, what that actually means is, I mean, we must be over 50% now, very close. We're pretty much getting to the point where the majority of the audience is actually on internet radio. Okay, they're listening through some sort of
Yeah,
device.
it's really grown as well since the beginning of this year.
Mm. Really, do you have any insights as to why that might be? Is it just because so many more people have cell phones? Is it that there's been somebody out there really promoting their internet radio station? That's
I mean, I think it's definitely cell phones are definitely the big driver of this,
yeah,
and I wonder if it's things like traditionally where you would cut away from an internet radio station and go and listen back to an FM station, say in the car. I think that's probably changed as well quite a lot.
yeah. I can
So
actually well imagine it has. So, hands up here. We've got a lot of content for you. A lot of this, though, is a sneak peek at a paid training program we have called List the Magnet 2. Regardless of if you've got List the Magnet 2 or you're interested in it or you're not and you just want to get the free techniques, we've got a lot for you today. For any of you that want to have a look, and I recommend not doing that now because it'll distract you, it's radio.co/courses/listener magnet. And like I say, we're going to be taking some core elements of Listener Magnet and discussing them with you today. We're going to be covering two major strategies to grow your station today. And like I said a little bit earlier, it's got nothing to do with sticking loads of keywords on your website, which I think is just awful technique that I've seen some people promote for radio stations. It's nothing to do with paid advertising or endless social media posts. Instead, we're going to focus on strategies to create rabid fans. And whatever techniques that you've got yourself, and I'm sure you've all got individual techniques that perhaps the others don't, this is a good base to build from. So our schedule is looking at audience insights, who your audience is, and we'll discuss why that's important in a moment. Practical strategies that you can take away and implement today. I'm going to show you a strategy in Facebook and YouTube. It's not paid, it's completely free, that is going to really help you refocus your radio station. I think you'll really love what I've got for you. Like I said, we're going to have a live demonstration of those two powerful techniques. But firstly, Mike, this is where I'm going to need your help because I can't see people. We've got a number of questions coming up in a moment. So, as we just discussed, there's this new avalanche of listeners. Internet radio is becoming the majority. It's already a plurality, but it's probably going to be a majority this year if it's not already. So, what I'm wanting to know is, where do people think that all of these new listeners are going? Who are they listening to? Seeing as compared to 1 year ago, 70% more people are listening to internet radio regularly. So, Mike, if you can just look in the chat and the questions box and just see where people think these listeners are going, what's their opinions? Because I'd be very interested to know.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting for people to come through with their questions. Actually, a couple of people are confirming that they do indeed listen to internet radio in their cars now. So that probably has definitely affected the listening levels, like we said.
Yes.
Tune in, I think, seems to be the majority.
Yes. Yes, certainly the growth of TuneIn has been incredibly impressive. So we can definitely see, and I think everybody'd agree on the call, that there's this huge influx of new listeners. There are people like us who've got internet radio for years and understand it, but there are also people like your grandma who's now tuning in on her iPad. There are people who have got their
Yeah.
headphones in the office just listening to internet radio. Now, some people might say, well, why would you want to listen to internet radio versus some sort of on-demand service? And I would say, if you're listening to a good music station, it's about curation. In other words, the DJ, the broadcaster is choosing stuff, and that's how you discover new things. If you're doing talk radio, of course, then you're less impacted by on-demand services such as Spotify. So, for me, we've got a number of places these listeners are going. One, they're going to all of the smaller stations, but a lot are not ending up on your station. They're being stolen by what I call the corporates and the 1%, the really big stations, because they've got that ad budget to connect with people. And if you're not seeing it in your particular type of broadcasting now, I promise you will soon. Okay, we've kind of reached this threshold point. Now, I'm not going to advertise. I'm not going to suggest that anybody advertise. I'm not going to advise that. We can't and shouldn't attempt to compete with any of them on advertising. We're doing internet radio for a reason. Our budget's a lot smaller, but that doesn't mean that you can't grow into a big station. So the strategy I'm going to recommend is to focus and refine our stations to reflect specific interests, not generic FM nonsense, where it's something for everybody. And I think you'll see this in a lot of the bigger internet radio stations over the next few years as well. By being really specific, we can bond with our listeners in a way they can't. So, Mike, what I think I'd recommend to everybody on the call first is thinking about their station. Is there a way that they can make it more specific rather than trying to say, let's increase our listener base by trying to appeal to more people and relax in what we do? I'm recommending the opposite, that people get a little more focused. Does that make sense?
It does to me, yeah, definitely. There's quite a few people that have come through now, and I think the vast majority of people seem to consume their radio on TuneIn. A couple of people saying iTunes as well.
Well, I certainly use iTunes for podcasts, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
So I think for us to be able to compete, we have to offer something really specific that appeals to people. And that doesn't mean, getting rid of your radio station and starting again. It means looking at what the best bits are, what people want the most, and focusing on it. And that might sound a little bit vague, but later on I'll show you an actual specific technique to figure out what the most popular areas of your radio station are, beyond any stats that you might have. Okay, I'm talking about something where the numbers are big enough that you can see this is clearly more popular than this. And I'm not going to say to you, you should only focus on the popular stuff. Okay, if you can still see when we do this, the numbers for something that you're passionate about, then go with that, because thanks to the internet, we can get the listener base if we can offer them something that perhaps other people aren't. So we're putting a new twist on maybe music or talk radio. So now, as I mentioned, I'm just going to ask a few questions, and Mike, if you can feedback a few of the answers while I read these out, it's going to really help us define things. So how long have people been running their station, and why did they get started? And I'll just have a sip of water whilst we wait a few minutes just for some answers to come in. If you want to read out 2 or 3, perhaps that catch your eye.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will do. As they're coming in, 4 years. Stevie Connor's saying he's been running his station for 4 years. Phil Dorsey's been running his station for 5 years. Morgan, 5 years as a hobby and a love of music. DJ B has been broadcasting since 2010. 5 years. John Van Camp's been broadcasting for 4 years. A couple of people are saying they're yet to start, but they're wanting to start soon.
Okay, that's really interesting, specifically for the people wanting to start, because they can actually start off with some of the strategies we're discussing now. So the reason that I was asking why people started when they started was that at Radio.co, we found that most broadcasters fall into one of a few types. And I'd be interested to know if anybody sees themselves as one of these types. there are other categories as well, but these are the main ones. And firstly, there's the visionary, and that's if you're doing talk radio typically. So maybe you're putting out there a sports message, political message, a religious message, largely about talk radio. Okay, and I've seen some self-improvement internet radio stations recently, and there's one in particular. I think it's called Earth Radio. I think James will remember the one I'm talking about, or it's very much about business and self-improvement. So there are those kind of stations out there. So that's the visionary. The guru is typically more music-based. This is where you've got a really cool style of music or particular genre that you're interested in, old or new, and you want to share your passion for that music. You're the guru. Next, the celebrity. The celebrity is getting industry experience. You're using internet radio to get yourself to a level that you can just enter in as somebody who's doing something other than going out and getting coffees. And then there's the fourth and final group, and this is people who are interested in the technology. They're running the station because they needed to create a way to learn the skills, and I commend people for doing that. They're mastering the technology, so when they go out into industry, they already know the key tools. They know the technical terminology because internet radio is obviously slowly but surely shifting aside traditional analog broadcast radio. So just quickly, what type of broadcaster do you think you are? Do you think you're a visionary, sharing a message, a guru, sharing your musical taste or style? Are you more focused on a celebrity? So you're a celebrity presenter, DJ, you're wanting to get into the industry on an audience-facing basis. You want to be a famous DJ. Nothing wrong with that. Or are you an engineer? Mike, have we had anybody come back with any feedback on that?
Yeah, the vast majority of people are saying guru, then followed by visionary.
Okay,
I would say. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. The reason I'm asking this is it's going to help you with a very specific strategy we'll be looking at in a moment. Because although it may not seem it, being able to identify your internet radio broadcaster type will help you figure out a strategy to build your core listener base of rabid fans. Because there are always going to be people who come and go, and we can't try and cater to them too much. And sometimes, and it's heartbreaking this, over the past few years, I've seen some stations come through, particularly when I've been sat in the office with you guys. I've seen some people come through who they're actually changing their station to try and be more inclusive. And the way I put this, why I'd say this is so risky is, imagine if you're running a political radio station. What do you think is going to be more successful, disregarding your politics? Let's say you have a Democrat-based station. Would it make sense to start trying to appeal to Republicans as well? Do you think that would weaken your listener base or improve it? What do people think about that?
Okay, let's see.
So political talk radio, you've got a station that's broadcasting either largely Republican talk radio or Democrat talk radio. You decide to try and get a bigger audience by adding the opposing political party. And in the UK, that might be Conservatives and Labour. So
the vast majority of people are saying weaken.
It certainly would. And that's why so many TV shows and talk radio shows become very polarized and very sort of extreme sometimes as well on both sides, because they're catering to a specific audience rather than trying to weaken it. And, in the days of broadcast with FM, it was harder to get the audience, particularly if you're a regional station. It was harder to get that audience if you went too specific. And that's why we've ended up with sort of radio stations, the bigger ones I'm talking about here, Mike, that really focus on just playing all the chart hits all the time. They will just play whatever's popular at the time to try and ride a wave. But we can't ever get the numbers where that's going. That kind of model's going away. So this question might be less relevant for the new people. What are they hoping to do? What are they hoping to achieve? Is it just for entertainment? Is it for a hobby? Do they have a specific aim? So any of you listening, if you do have some specific aims or hopes or dreams with your station, let us know now. And if you don't, if nobody does, I think that's fine as well.
A few people are saying they started out in terrestrial radio, and they actually...
That's interesting. Go on.
Yeah, they started out in terrestrial radio quite a number of years ago. A couple of people are saying they started podcasting initially.
Interesting.
Yeah. Few people saying running it as a business. Couple of people saying that they have a passion that they want to express. They want to get to other people.
Okay. One of the things I was saying, it's not relevant for this webinar, but I did want to drop in it. It is perfectly possible to run your internet radio station as a going concern. And I know
Yeah.
quite a number of people, that's all they do. And they have staff doing it. It's perfectly possible to do that. But the thing is, if you don't have the audience there, if you don't have the listener base there, you're going to struggle to build up significant revenues. Sure, you can still generate profits, but if you're wanting to do this as your job, your career, and you're wanting to do it for yourself, not for somebody else, it is possible, but you've got to have that audience base there. So, a few more questions.
That's true, actually, Steve. I
Oh,
would
go on,
actually
yeah.
say that is true, and we have a number of customers who I can think of off the top of my head who actually started out running their stations as a hobby in their spare time, and they have actually turned it into a full-time business, and they're now employing staff. So that is definitely possible. I think you're right.
Yeah, I know that that's not suitable for everyone. It's certainly not what we're sort of talking about today. But I think everybody here, I don't think there's anybody who'd say, I don't want to grow my audience. I'm happy with the audience level that I have. I think everybody
Yeah.
would want to grow it. One other quick question: what category of station are people broadcasting? Music, talk,
The
politics,
vast majority.
religion?
Yeah, the vast majority of people are saying they are running music stations, I would say. A couple of people saying talk stations, political, country music, community stations, K-pop. It's coming up a couple of
Really,
times.
that's an interesting
Um,
one. Cool.
yeah,
Okay, so because we're getting a little bit behind on time, I don't want to push this one. If people don't feel comfortable revealing it, it's fine. How many hours are people broadcasting a week, and how many listeners are they getting, let's say, a week? Does anybody know that? Are they willing to share? If not, that's completely cool. I can understand if people didn't want to, but I think it'd be interesting to know where we're at with that.
okay, so we've got some people coming through. Morgan saying 60 people per day. Russell saying about 1,000 listeners per week. Steve, 300 a week. Most people are broadcasting every day, 24/7.
Okay, yeah. I mean, one of the things is obviously the more automated you make your station, that's something that's very, very achievable, as we know. So it's interesting to kind of get a sense of where everybody is. Now I want to talk about the first big important thing, and that's types of listeners, because we've identified people's station types and the type of broadcaster that you are. So in the next few minutes, we're going to look at the different types and motivations of audiences, because if we can understand the types of audiences, we can figure out how to attract and keep more of them, more of the right kind of people, rather than trying to chase after the wrong type of audience. And I'll be talking about 3 big broadcaster mistakes that I've seen over the past decade that I really would like everybody to avoid. So, firstly, casual listeners. These are people who they're tuning in, perhaps they've got some free time. They could be here with you this week, gone next week. Maybe they listen to a competitor. And there are 2 types of casual listener that, I think generally you find. So, new to your topic, let's say that you're broadcasting K-pop, and I'm picking that because we just had it come in. Somebody could be a casual listener who's just starting to explore about K-pop. They just kind of discovered it, they think it's cool, they love it as a type of music, and they're just looking through a directory or an online listing, or they just happen to find your link. They start listening to you, and they just found maybe you're the first station they ever listened to. Fact and chances are that they're probably going to move on and try some other stations. They may come back to you, but how many of us, when we get interested in a new topic, settle on the first book we find, or the first website on that topic? So, if they're going to be interested, they'll stick with you. Don't be trying to convince people as to why they have to stick with you. Next, somebody who has already been interested in what you broadcast, and I'm going to refer to that as your niche, by the way. I'm in the UK, so you might say niche if you're in the US. But let's say that you're broadcasting a 60s genre, freak beat. It's pretty obscure. Some of you will know, some of you won't. I have a client who is pretty sort of big in that sort of circle. Now, if somebody's already aware of freak beat, but they're not aware of you, they're much more likely to stick with you because they've gone out there, they've sampled what they like, what they don't. If they come to you, they're much more likely to stick with you. This is a casual type of listener who is much more likely to become a rabid fan. Next, you've got your existing audience. These are people who know you. And we'll be talking about knowing you later on and something called the KLT factor. These people are your fans. They're your existing audience. I'm hoping that you know what they like or don't like about your station because they will have feelings on both sides. And one of the things I want to show you today is how you can keep them listening, because so many people, when trying to grow their station, and I've seen this in some pretty bad books as well, ebooks, so they try and grow their station. They completely neglect their core audience. And it's just like having a leaky bucket and trying to fill it with water. And the only way to grow your audience is to have such a torrent of new listeners that it's actually counteracting what's leaking out of the bottom, your existing audience dissipating. This is exactly what happens, by the way, when people try and widen their base. So let's say that they're doing country music and then they try and introduce a more pop element as well, and they're doing something quite traditional. Initially, they might see a boost as new people come in. But what they don't realize is hidden in those audience figures, their original audience is starting to disappear. So what we want to do is we want to keep our audience, we want to keep focused rather than narrowing out, and we want to work on other ways to increase our listener base. Now, my favorite is other people's listeners, OPLs. These are people who like what you're doing. They're passionate already. They just maybe haven't heard of you or haven't been drawn in enough to keep listening to you. But bear in mind, if you're broadcasting in a particular area or niche, you absolutely should know the other people who are broadcasting. I don't mean personally, but you should be aware of their station. You should have had a listen. Okay, I'd hope everybody out there is doing that. So my quick question for everybody, who out there has spent some time listening to a competitor's internet radio station, whether they're of similar size or they're absolutely huge? Who's actually gone out and done that?
Yeah, a couple of people saying they have done. Yes, a few people saying, yes, I do this all the time.
Perfect, that's a great strategy.
Yeah, the vast majority, one or two people saying that they don't do this, but I would say, yeah, the vast majority of people are saying they do it
if you're not,
on a regular basis.
Definitely try it out. Because other people's listeners, they're already confirmed, they're passionate, they just haven't discovered you yet. And they are the ideal audience for you to get. And that's the audience that you can appeal to listen to your station without diluting what you're doing and without upsetting your current listener base. So I forget who it was that has had 60 people a day. Maybe it was Steve.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there's no reason for Steve to dilute what he's doing and lose his 60 a day. Instead, because of the size of the internet, there are plenty of competitors out there, and we'll discuss that term later on, plenty of competitors out there who can offer him the kind of audience he needs, but they're not aware of him. That audience base isn't aware of him. So we need to figure out, how do we connect with them? How do we get them to listen? Before we do that, though, let's just think about our aims. Keeping our existing listener base tuning in by not diluting what we're doing, getting recommendations from them, in other words, talking to your listeners if you can. So I'm not saying necessarily you have to have a call in, but at least find out some way to reach to them. A quick strategy would be to create a Facebook page. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's a little bit off topic. But, actually just getting some feedback, finding out what people love. A great way to do this is to actually have voting competitions. So, best show of the month. If you've got sort of actual scheduled content, some different types of thing, it's not just one continuous monotonous loop. That's a great thing to do. That's another tip. Don't try and just have this endless broadcast of music. Break it up into segments and categories at specific times. That makes your station much easier to be manageable in terms of bite-sized chunks. ultimately, of course, we want to get publicity for our station, and that's going to allow us to grow our audience. What we don't want to do, and these are two big mistakes, by the way, that can really sabotage you. Some people focus on getting new people who they see as low-hanging fruit. What do I mean by low-hanging fruit? It's the easy stuff to grab, okay? They go after whoever they think the easiest audience is. So if there's a trend about Justin Bieber next month, they'll try and jump on that, okay? And that's going to be a pretty weak audience. Don't think that you can sell your type of radio to people who aren't interested. I've seen some people might go crazy posting on Reddit to try and actually get people to their station. And occasionally, they do see a little bit of a boost. I've actually seen this technique was around a few years ago. I've seen it build back up again. But what happens is, if you get, let's say, this is with talk radio, if you get an inflammatory topic onto Reddit, get loads of people posting, then loads of people come in and listen to your interview. They probably won't be around the next month. Reddit traffic, I've noticed, seems to disappear very, very quickly. It just turns to dust and it goes somewhere else the next day or the next week. But I really think it's a good idea for people not to try and waste their time with some of those kind of methods. These are more general marketing methods, and they're just not suitable for internet radio, in my opinion. In terms of trying to convert... Oh, go on, Mike.
Sorry, yeah, no, a few people are actually saying what they like about internet radio versus traditional radio is that they can actually prove their numbers and their listeners, and they can see how their station's growing.
Well, yeah, I think the metrics that you get are one of the most powerful tools to actually grow your station, because you can see whether you're heading in the right direction or not. You've got that immediate feedback. With sort of the bigger stations, I'm talking particularly about FM, but I know it's going to start translating into digital and internet radio. In fact, me and James were talking last week about a specific example, the UK, which I'll not name, explicitly anyway. One of the things is they've got a huge amount of budget. The way they survive is by watering down what they do. And they're not going to go chasing after smaller groups. They're going to put themselves front and center. We don't have the ad budget to do that, obviously. The second biggest mistake is trying to promote your station to other station owners. I've seen this where people in forums will post their station link in a forum or thread where people are talking about technical things about their station. This is not a way to get listeners. It's a way to annoy other station owners. And you might think that's not a big issue, but as we'll find out a little bit later, it is. Because one of the strategies I'm going to recommend is, instead of seeing other radio stations in your niche or niche as competitors, understand that you all share the same pool of audience. And for the most part, it's never going to get to a stage where somebody's listening so much to Joe over here that that listener is never going to go and listen to Steve. We're unlikely ever to be dominating somebody's listening time that much that we can't afford to be generous with other people in our niche. So let's say you're broadcasting instrumental jazz. Don't consider the other people competitors. It's really unlikely, small internet radio stations, you can deprive your competitor totally of listeners, or they can do the same to you in terms of, number of hours listened. If you start to work together, there are so many more opportunities. So, business-wise, competition-wise, we have to have a completely different view, in my opinion, than the bigger stations. So to truly grow our station, we need to focus on reducing our listener churn rate. This is the amount of listeners that leave us every month. And sometimes it isn't obvious when you're running an internet radio station, but we're continually losing regular listeners and getting new regular listeners. And if you're seeing your numbers being static for quite a long time, it's because your churn rate is too high. Next, we want to focus on reaching out to other people's audience. Remember, other people's listeners. If we don't view other stations doing similar things to us as competitors, we can reach out, build relationships. Otherwise, at best, we'll grow organically. But in most cases, what happens is our churn rate gets too big and we can't grow. And some people, as I've mentioned several times, actually dilute their station. And they do that in a desperate attempt to grow. So now we've moved on to the key part. We'll be having a live demonstration.
Steve, sorry, there's a few people asking what churn rate is. Do you want to just explain that?
Okay, yeah, that's very, very important. I shouldn't have really just rushed over that. But A churn rate comes from the phrase churn and burn. And what it means is essentially using up a resource. So if we can imagine a forest, if you were to go into a forest, get all of the trees and use them up or burn them at a particular rate, you would just churn through them. In other words, process through them, and eventually the forest would be empty because you hadn't given the saplings time to actually grow. So it's basically a churn rate. Every type of thing has one, from businesses to email lists to actual venues like restaurants. The churn rate is the number of people who've decided they're no longer interested. Sometimes it's because they don't like your station. Sometimes it's because they've lost interest. Maybe they're no longer interested in country music. So that churn rate, you can view it almost, it's like a continual leak on your radio station. Everybody has one. Some stations, when they make changes to schedules, to presenters, they increase their churn rate and they lose a lot of their audience. And if your churn rate ever exceeds your growth rate, your audience declines, your overall audience numbers decline. And that's not a situation we want to be in. And that's why I've advised people so much against trying to widen what they do, make it less specific. Because the less passionate you are, the higher your churn rate will be. You can't do anything about people who are part of that churn rate because they've lost interest in the topic. If you're broadcasting country music and they're no longer interested, nothing you can do about that. It's not your problem. Remember, other stations will survive with that situation, and so can yours. So hopefully that gives people a little bit more of an idea of what churn rate actually is. Any more feedback, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think that's really helped people actually.
So one of the ways we can reduce this churn rate, which is hard to identify with your raw stats, there isn't a really easy way to identify. If you've got people coming in and going, you don't always know if they're the same people or not. But what we need to do is understand who our listeners are and what they enjoy. The more we can understand our listeners, the more we can talk to them directly. And the more we can specifically focus, as we discovered with the type or niche that we're broadcasting, the more we can actually understand our audience as well. Well, guess what? We seem more passionate. And passion's the one thing that we've got to keep people listening, to get them engaged. And a lot of big stations sacrifice passion. So we're calling what we're doing now building our listener avatar. We're going to focus on creating a fake character, almost like an e-fit, you could say, in a crime, of our perfect listener. This is the person who we're going to imagine ourselves scheduling for, creating our programming for, playlists for. This listener avatar, okay, is how we essentially turn our station into a listener magnet. Because all of the other stations, they're wanting to add people in. They're wanting to add this demographic in, that interest in. We're saying, no, let's focus. The internet means that there's more than enough people who have the same passion as us. Let's focus, let's double down and communicate that to them. So the information that we get from our listener avatar profile, which is our ideal listener, our typical listener, obviously it's not a real person, this should direct our show production and our schedule. And we want to know who they are. How old are they? For instance, maybe your audience is all over 40 or over 50, or maybe they're under 30. Maybe they're majority women, maybe they're majority men. I've talked to some people who found that their audience is 90% men. And this actually happened with a guy called RadioCo I was talking to about 4 weeks ago. And his audience was literally, I think, about 91% men. And for him, does it make much sense to try and focus on the 9% of his audience who are women, or to double down on the 91%? I think it probably makes sense to focus on 91%. Now, of course, it could be that you've got a pretty even split in terms of gender or age, in which case you might be happy with that, but you're aware of it and you know to keep your content balanced then. So you've got something for men, you've got something for women, something perhaps for people who are retired if it's an age-based thing. What about location? Maybe if you find most of your your subscribers are listening in London, then maybe it's time to make your radio station a little more London-centric. Interests and education. Do they have other related passions? How educated are they? Does it matter? Well, for a political radio station, it might. If they've got people listening who a lot of them went to college or a lot of them didn't go to college, then that can probably inform the kind of things that they should be broadcasting and talking about, hot topics. So to really connect with your audience, you need to create this single customer audience avatar. Of course, it's not going to represent everybody who listens to you. That's impossible. But it's going to really help you connect. Because the more we can connect with our audience, share our passion, the more they'll keep tuning in and recommend us to friends. And that's why we don't need to focus on advertising, spamming Facebook, things like that. We cover a lot more about this, by the way, guys, in Listener Magnet 2.0, which we discussed at the start. We don't have the time to go through everything there. So we're going to focus on 1 to 2 core techniques that will provide a great base for you. So we need to figure out who our audience are, what they want, and we're going to be using Facebook and YouTube. Now, I'm going to be using my Facebook ad account. We're not going to be creating an ad. We're not going to have time to show you how to actually set up a Facebook advertising account. There are lots of demos out there. You're not required to spend a penny to do this. I really want to point that out. We'll look at YouTube as well. If you find any of this too complex, don't worry about it. I'm really sorry it's to be compressed. We've got about 20 minutes left. So I couldn't not share this with you, but I probably couldn't go into a huge amount of detail. So I'm going to try and move screens. Hopefully it goes okay. Facebook, no doubt, will ask me to log back in again. And yes, let's just have a look. And my mouse pointer's disappeared. That's incredibly frustrating. But we'll figure this out, okay? So I've gone into my Facebook Ads Manager. It'll look different to yours because I do a lot of consulting work for people. You can just simply click Create an Ad on the menu on the side. You're never going to have to enter a credit card number or anything like that because we're never going to make a real advert. So I'm just going to click Send People to Your Website. It probably will ask me to log back in. Okay, and as you can see, guys, I'm actually struggling somewhat because my mouse pointer's disappeared, which is incredibly bizarre. This is going to prove incredibly difficult for me to click on the button because my mouse pointer's gone. Right, I'm going to have to go back to this screen here, guys, and try somehow and resurrect my mouse pointer, which has disappeared. I'm so sorry, everybody. This is a very, very bizarre problem to have.
So whilst Steve's doing that, I'll pick out some of the kind of interesting things people have been saying. Phil said, should we be focusing more on doing narrowcasts rather than broadcasts, which I think is actually a really nice phrase. And I think if you've been listening to kind of what Steve's been saying, that's probably a really good way of thinking about it. It's you need to find your niche.
Well, guys, it looks like my mouse pointer has disappeared. I do not want to reset my computer or stop this, so I'm afraid I'm just going to have to explain a little bit and try and muddle through, which isn't the best, I appreciate, but gosh, if only I could
get... Is it working now?
No.
What we could potentially do, Steve, is we could record a little video tutorial and put this on the blog afterwards so people can see that.
Like I said, Listener Magnet, we do have a fantastic video explaining this. What you do is you essentially go to create an advert and say send people to your website. And let me just see. Oh, gosh, I had it then. If only. Guys, I realize this must be super frustrating to watch.
So Mariel's asking, is jazz a good niche? I would say, yeah, any form of music, any genre of music that you're really passionate about, that you love, is a great niche to go into, definitely, because it's something that you can talk about authoritatively. And, you know, that really, the more authoritative you are about a subject, the more people are going to listen to you.
Okay, guys, I kind of cracked it by guessing where my mouse pointer is. This is absolutely insane that I'm doing this. So we've gone to create a new audience. And an audience in Facebook is basically a way you describe a group of people that you'd like to advertise to. And you can see here on the right-hand side, we've got the audience definition. Don't worry about placements. That's just where your adverts will appear. We're not creating any adverts. And you'll see potential reach. And that's 37 million people. Now, What we can do is, firstly, we can type in countries in the location section. And by adding and taking them away, we can see this audience number go up and down. Same with the ages brackets here and gender. So this allows us to see, if we, let's say we click on all, we can see the total number of people that we would advertise to. And because Facebook's so big and popular now, that actually represents the general population in a lot of cases. If we were to click on men, we could see how many men were interested. And if we were to click on women, we'd see how many women were interested. So we could quickly break down exactly how our audience is split, more than likely. So, Mike, are you with me so far? Because I realize this is a very strange way to do things.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, next you'll see we've got detailed targeting. So if you can see genders highlighted in blue, two things down, we've got detailed targeting. Can you see that, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so what you do in detailed targeting is you try and type in the most simple term for your station. So we could, for instance, we could type in, we want to advertise to people, let's say we wanted to type in jazz. So we put jazz in there. I'm going to try and use the tab key and see if I can actually get down to this. I can, yes.
That's great.
This is absolutely bizarre, guys. I do apologize. I've never had my mouse pointer disappear before. So you see we've got jazz and we've got suggestions here. So let's say, right, you can see we've got 5,000 people interested in jazz rap. So if I press enter, hopefully that, yes, that's worked. And can you see it's altered our potential reach? Which is on the
on the right-hand side.
Yeah, under audience definition, just above estimated daily reach, it says potential daily reach, 110,000 people in the United Kingdom. So it's a little box sort of on the right-hand side. So you've got the main sort of strip. Then you've got audience definition. You've got like a little speedometer with red, green, and yellow. And then you just go a little bit below there, and it says potential reach, 110,000 people.
Yeah, that we can see that, and we can see the estimated daily reach underneath for Facebook and across Instagram as well.
And what we can do is we can put in different countries in there, and even states, and sometimes cities, so we can work out where our audience is biggest. So we can see, okay, let's say Canada's really passionate about what we're broadcasting. Then we know that maybe adding some Canadian things in there could be quite useful. I mean, references or maybe Canadian artists. Now, for a lot of people, the demographics aren't going to matter. It's internet radio. But for some local and community stations, this can be useful. But more useful is the fact we can click on men and women and we can see that audience number alter. This is the audience we'll be advertising to. But remember, Facebook is so big now that the way that the demographics split is going to represent your listener base. So I can't really do this because of my darn mouse pointer disappearing. But if I was to type in United States, or even specific states within the US, I could then figure out what the gender split and the age split was by altering the two age requirements. So this is a really easy way to identify, let's say the majority of your audience are retirees. You might not know this, but this is a way to figure out that people who are interested in acid jazz, avant-garde jazz, the majority of them are retired, balanced 50-50 between men and women, and most of them live on the East Coast. Some of that stuff's going to be useful, some of it won't, but by understanding the typical profile of your audience, you can actually talk to them more. You can bring in references that are going to be more relevant to them. You can tailor the type of artist that you broadcast or the type of political figures you have on board based on what you discover here. Now, I don't think I can actually make it over to, I can make it over to YouTube. That's fantastic. Next strategy, if you go and type into YouTube, whatever your topic is, you can find channels, okay, that these channels are collections. So can you see here, 3 down, Mike, we've got Extreme Health Radio.
Yes, I can see that.
And we've got the channel button. And what that means is that they're obviously passionate about the topic. That means they'll have produced multiple videos on this. If you've got something, and if you look just below, you've got Health Talk Radio. If you've got something in that area that you want to share, why not send them a message? Why not try and connect with them? The other thing you can do, and I would struggle to do it too much, is you can click on the channel and it will show you the viewing figures for each of those videos. So you can figure out which of those topics, or in the case of music, which of those tracks, and this works particularly as well for older music, you can figure out which are the most popular by looking at the viewing figures of the individual videos in the channel. So it's giving you somebody to connect to, because remember, we're not viewing it as competitors anymore. We're looking at people to cooperate with, because we're all small guys compared to the big stations. So that's, a really, really powerful thing to do as well. YouTube's allowing you to find people to connect to and allowing you to identify what some of the hot topics and interesting topics in your niche are. So, Mike, any questions on that? Because I know it's super complex. I mean, I doubt we'd be able to cover everything about it there, but
I think there's actually a few people coming through saying they're using Facebook and YouTube in a similar fashion to understand,
that's
who their customers are.
Really, really fantastic. I feel that defining this ideal or core listener demographic, key interests, who they are, where they are, really, really helps, because the more we can focus our passion and be specific, we don't have to worry about the big stations, because we're offering something better that talks directly to people rather than tuning into something that's really quite generic. So I'll just go back to the presentation if I can. Yes, thankfully I'm managing to use my computer without the mouse pointer. This is truly, truly surreal. Right, so we know who they are, our listeners now. We need to connect with them more, and we need to keep them listening. We can do this by two things: increasing their exposure to us through better scheduling and increasing our KLT factor. And before we move on, does anybody know what the KLT factor is?
No one's responded. Nope, I don't think many people do.
Okay.
No one so far.
We'll come back to that in a moment. We want to keep our audience, and we want to focus on how we can keep it growing, obviously. KLT stands for know, like, and trust. And think about it, when you listen to a radio station regularly, it's like visiting an old friend, whether it's a particular announcer, like a particular DJ. And this is why famous people get people coming up to them and talking to them as if, they know them, because people were exposed to celebrities. People who broadcast media become like friends or family to us in a weird way. We look up to them as a celebrity or authority figure, but a lot of the same things that would happen with a friendship or a family relationship kind of happen with the audience. Just think about this. If your audience know you, they know things about you, rather than you being anonymous, they'll feel a stronger connection to you than the other guy who's broadcasting. The more that they actually like you, so not just that they know things about you, but they actually feel a connection to you. And of course, part of that's through your passion. The more likely they are to tune in again. And the more they trust you to keep delivering what they want and stay honest and ethical. And I'm talking about not sort of trying to sort of cram in loads of adverts, things like that, suddenly change things up. The more they're likely to listen to you. So we want to increase this KLT factor. Next, I spoke about scheduling. We want to see what's most popular in our station. We've already discovered from YouTube what some of the hot topics might be. And you can look at your own radio stats as well. Try to avoid having endless flows of music. It'd be far better for you to just broadcast 3 hours a day or 1 hour a day. That's really something that's really passionate and specific and people remember, rather than an endless playlist of, let's say, instrumental jazz. That's not so compelling for somebody to tune into. They can do that with on demand, or they can put a traditional FM radio on in the background. So we need predictable scheduling that allows people to retune in. And we need specific shows, whether it's music, playlists, whatever, that are broken up into 1 hour, maybe 2 hour blocks at the most, that people say, hey, I need to tune in for that. Now, of course, you can make replays available. You can rebroadcast what you're doing. So if you're just doing sort of playlist-based radio, obviously you could have maybe a show every week that's on a specific artist. You could have that at a specific time. By creating the concept of shows and then just avoiding endless noise, people actually have a time and date to actually meet up with you, just like they do with a friend. Now, of course, if they miss out, they can catch a replay if you have those available. They can catch the rebroadcast at a later time. They can download an MP3 off your website. But I promise you, by actually having specifically scheduled things on specific topics, don't worry about people missing out. Some people always will, but you'll create a much greater bond. And I promise you, when somebody does miss out, they're going to want to come back. And they'll be thinking about you not the guy with a 24-hour playlist of random tracks on a music genre. Now, of course, if you're wanting to fill up radio time, of course, have that as well in the times that you're not doing the more specific stuff. But specific 1 hour, 2 hour things, even if it's just once or twice a week, helps identify you versus what other people are doing. It makes you stand out. Next, drama. This might sound odd, but you might have work friends who you know nothing about outside, but the majority of the people you have strong relationships with are relationships where you see them outside of that frame of work. Maybe you go for a coffee. Maybe you see them at the gym, but you also occasionally meet up for a run. We want to build real relationships as much as possible with our audience base. We know that we'll get more listeners and keep more listeners if we're passionate. Well, it's the same with connecting. Radio on its own gives us authority and engagement, no doubt about it. But to truly connect, we need to provide people with insights into what we're doing, little behind the scenes things, and personalities outside of broadcasting. And this is where having things like Facebook pages and Twitter can help. Maybe having YouTube videos behind the scenes, things like this. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed about what you're doing, okay? Whether it's just you in your bedroom or you in an office block, whatever it is. Actually share photos of behind the scenes, things like that. People are passionate about what you do. They really appreciate the time and effort you're putting in. So allow them to get to know a little bit more about what goes on, or you as a person. It will help build that bond and you as a personality. Now, we've not had time to cover many of the strategies that you could use for reaching out. Like I say, they're covered in Listener Magnet 2 in more detail. We only have a few minutes left, so it's not a huge amount of time. But I can break this down into two other categories that I'd like you to focus on. Outreach, which is social media, email marketing and advertising. That's all going to be informed by your customer avatar. Graphics and audio imaging makes you more memorable. Combine that with great scheduling and specific times where people just have to attend to hear that great DJ, to hear that interview of the week. You're really going to attract more people. And it's weird how being more specific, more focused, more selective, more exclusive will actually attract you a bigger, more passionate audience. Remember, we don't want huge numbers of people to listen. If they're only going to go away the next day, we want people who will come back time and time again. So, we've got other media, and you can find lots out there about using Facebook, YouTube, Facebook advertising, Snapchat, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. You'll even find some of it on Radio.co's blog. So you can go through there and learn some strategies. What I've tried to share with you today is a powerful core base to grow your station and to build that relationship. Building relationships and being passionate about what you do will do more for your radio station than anything else. Now, if you start using those other techniques, some of which you can find on the blog, some of which you can find in ebooks and training courses, but you don't have that base there, you're going to have a much higher churn rate. And as we spoke about earlier, that churn rate is like having a leaky bucket and you keep filling it up with water, but your audience will never grow at the rate that you deserve unless you can plug those leaks. The only way you do that is by focusing on who your audience really is and what they want. Once you start to get that growth as well, what happens is, and one of the things that happens if you create passionate listeners, is they're more likely to recommend to friends because they're proud that they listen to you and they say, hey, do you know what? I listened to Steve's DJ set. It's Friday at 9 p.m. I find out about all the latest tracks in dubstep, whatever it is. And, you really got to tune into this. I think you're going to love it. So imagine somebody's at the gym. They're on the treadmill. They're listening to your station. A buddy comes up next to them. He's into dubstep as well. And he's like, hey, if you like this, you really need to listen at Friday at 7. Internet radio means we don't have to always do scheduling. But if you can do just a few schedule-specific shows at specific times that really stand out, okay, really defined, and, we're talking about audio imaging, branding, things like that, you're really going to connect with people and you're going to essentially have almost like a meetup. Let's say you've got a friend. You're meeting for coffee at Starbucks at 1 p.m. on Saturday. Every Saturday you meet. You look forward to it. It's the same with radio listeners, I promise you. So in terms of getting other people's listeners, having a more compelling conversation, and I put that in inverted commas because we're not literally saying that, by having a more compelling conversation, in other words, what we're talking about with them, with your existing listeners, boosts engagement and boosts repeat listeners. It's one of the most powerful ways to actually grow, because if you can just keep more repeat listeners, and you've been maintaining 60 people a day, well, you're reducing your churn rate, so your station will start to grow faster without you having to do anything else. So by focusing on listener avatars, growing your KLT factor by sharing behind the scenes, by being more specific in your branding, by having that regular, predictable scheduling with must-have, must-attend events, we're essentially building a relationship. So one of the things you might not have considered is that today we've got probably around 70 or 80 people on, I think, Mike. That probably should be roughly correct. And when people see a replay, if we make a replay available, there'll be even more people that watch. Who attending here could work with who else? Who else potentially have you been on this call with who's doing something similar to you? Maybe one of you is doing acid jazz, one of you is doing avant-garde jazz. Why not consider talking about the other guy's show? Why not actually have them on for an interview or a guest DJ set? Like I say, don't worry about somebody taking your audience. People will happily still keep listening to your show. And by recommending other shows, one, it shows that you're not trying to keep your listener base. You're not afraid of competition. And as we know, a lot of what people would call competitors really aren't. There's more than enough listeners and enough hours for us all to share. And by doing this, and by communicating and cross-promoting, you become an authority figure, because think about that friend you know who will always tell you the right TV to buy, the right car to buy, the right beer to buy. You go to them for recommendations on the latest show to watch on Netflix. Well, if you're a person doing that on a radio station via a broadcast or via a Facebook page, you suddenly increased your authority. You suddenly increased how much somebody knows, likes, and trusts you, because you're doing something altruistic to help them out. So try and enlist the help of others in your broadcasting niche. Appear on each other's stations. So if you've been looking at competitors, if they're not, I don't recommend you try and go for somebody who's really far above you or below you. Go for somebody who's on a similar level. Try and start up a dialogue. I promise you, just get one or two people like this, and you will so rapidly grow your listener base. Make sure, though, that you've focused on your customer avatar, refined your radio station, worked on the KLT factor and your branding, and a lot of those people will stick. Mistake number 3, then, is assuming other stations in your broadcasting niche are your deadly rivals. If they're on a similar level to you, they are certainly not. So we're coming to the end of today's presentation. We've run a little bit over. We've only scratched the surface of how you can build what I would call, and what a Radio.co we call, a listener magnet station that draws in listeners and keeps them. We've seen some of the big flaws holding back other stations. We've looked at some of the best methods to grow our listener base. And I think you've got a lot there. So what benefits might come from growing our audience? Well, further audience growth. The more people you have listen, the more people talk about you, recommend you. So it's actually a virtuous circle. It feeds back into itself. And people actually start recommending you, and you get natural growth. And in the case of a friend of mine who runs a popular podcast, but could easily be turned into a radio station called the Strange Brew, he was actually featured, without his knowledge, in the top 5 podcasts. I think it was the Daily Telegraph. So he's been featured now in The Guardian, other UK newspapers. He's got a lot of sort of top artists from the 70s actually talking about him and recommending him and talking about him on their Facebook page, because he supports the community, he puts back, and he doesn't worry about competing with others. So that's a great way to create this virtuous circle of audience growth. And because we've plugged the leaks by sorting out our KLT factor and audience avatar, we don't have to worry about churn rate preventing us growing. I don't want to talk too much about this, but turning your radio station into a business, or even a hobby that generates cash, becomes much easier once you have a passionate listener base that starts growing. Actually, you can actually start to do ethical sort of things such as sponsorship, and selling best of shows as downloadable MP3s or extended interviews. There are so many financial opportunities as well, if you want to take advantage of them. As your audience grows, that's a passionate audience, your celebrity grows. That doesn't happen if you're paying for a ton of AdWords ads, which I know many of you wouldn't want to do, and getting people to just listen in. And remember, don't chase after the audience that isn't interested in your topic. That isn't easy hanging fruit. So if you're on a forum to do with cars, but your station is about hip hop, you're probably not going to get a huge amount of listeners. You'll get some. But instead, if you just focus on just improving your relationship with your existing audience, you'll find a lot of good things happen. Your influence is going to grow. Remember, we talked about how if you actually recommend what could be perceived as rivals, you actually almost kind of get the moral high ground, and you actually become an influencer because you're recommending and directing tastes and trends. And, this might sound ridiculous, but I bet nobody else is doing it in, your small specific area that you're really focused on. You can be that person. And once you've got authority, celebrity, and influence, it explodes your KLT factor. Because think about it. If Tom Cruise came up to you and said, hey, I really love what you do, you'd be like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Because he's got the authority, the influence, and the celebrity. So, joint ventures. This is where you work with other stations. As you recommend other stations, appear on them, and are identified in the general media as being a very passionate advocate of whatever it is you broadcast, other bigger stations just above you will want to get you involved, will want to bring you on. That's when people start approaching you. And then that opens you up to a whole new audience and even more growth. So, Mike, I don't know if you could just post the link for anybody who's interested in learning more. We cover a whole lot of stuff like this in Listen to Magnet too. So if you could just post the link in the chat box for people, anybody who's interested in signing up. One of the reasons that we're talking about this now is you've taken the time to attend. Okay, so we're going to give you a massive 50% off discount coupon. It's not going to be valid for long, so you kind of have to really sign up now. We're not giving away many of them, which is why we did this via a webinar. We really hope we've shared some value with you regardless. Myself and the Radio.co team, we spent a long time working on the Listen to Magnet range of products. There's an awful lot in there, a lot more than we could cover now. I mean, we'd need probably several days of endless webinars to get this across. What you've got right now is you've got a great base to actually grow from. So that coupon, by the way, let me just get through to that. I think, well, I'll just say actually, by the way, Listen to Magnet 2, obviously it starts off, what you're looking at, we've covered today some of week 1 and week 2. It goes right up to a very advanced level, by the way, and we talk about some of the big stations out there. Listener Secret 50 is the coupon code. Mike, am I correct in thinking that is 50% off?
That's correct. Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. So like I say, you've seen a very, very small selection of what Listener Magnet 2 covers. There's an awful lot more in there. We've really covered what I think is the base. You'll find out if you go and buy ebooks on growing your audience, things like that, you'll find that they're very different from what we've talked about today. But I can promise you, because the radio industry in terms of internet radio has changed so much since the FM days, a lot of these strategies are much more powerful. So like I say, it's radio.co/courses/listener magnet. And the 50% off code for people who've attended this webinar is Listener Secret 50. Mike, I just think we'll spend a final 5 minutes tidying sort of up, answering any questions, and then we'll end the webinar because I really appreciate people taking the time out to join us. I hope it's been useful. Any sort of final questions that we can just kind of run through?
I think the feedback, actually, there's a lot of feedback coming in at the moment, and people are really happy with this. They're really positive feedback. I would say if you've got some questions that you feel that haven't been answered, or if say you want to dig a bit deeper into this, then I would recommend taking the consultancy package, because that's where you'll get to work with one of our radio consultants in a one-to-one environment, so you can really dig into your station's strategy.
Just to clarify, Mike, there, because I'm not sure, when people get Listen to Magnet, they can get it with a consulting package as well if they choose to. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And how does the discount work? Is the discount...
discounts applied to either... Yeah, the discounts are applied to either, if you just buy the course, you get 50% off, but if you buy the course and the consultancy package together, then you also get 50% off. So it really is a very, it's a very good deal, that, and it means you get to sit down one-to-one with one of our radio consultants, and really just dig into your station strategy and looking at how we can take these elements and modules from within Listener Magnet and really apply them to your station.
One of the things that I'll say is, I know some people say, "Oh, I can't afford this." That's completely understandable. If you're not at the stage where you're ready to kind of move on with your station, you're not that passionate about it, you're just beginning, that's fine. I know other people, they haven't even started yet, but they want to start off in the right way and start off quickly. One of the other things that I've been asked in the past is, why do we charge for these courses? Well, just look at the volume that we've covered here, the research that we have to go through, the interviews that we have to do. It's not possible to do this kind of thing for free and actually get it done. It's just not, because obviously Radio.co is about setting up streaming stations, running streaming services. So to do things like this, I'm afraid, does cost. It's up to you whether you think the value that we're asking is worth it to you. I think it is. We spend a lot of time really finding out what works and what doesn't. And I think we're in a unique position because we see so many broadcasters, because we're involved with them. We see what works and what doesn't. And I think there are very, very few other people out there, Mike, who probably have the perspective and insight that we have.
No, I mean, this is it. You're completely right, Steve. We work with so many radio stations that we just have an unparalleled access that other people don't get, really. So, and we really care about our broadcasters as well. That is, it's incredibly important to us for our broadcasters to be able to grow their stations as much as they can.
One question I think might have sort of come up. Obviously, I can't see. It's a fairly typical sort of question when we've done webinars for other courses in the past. Is why offer a 50% discount? Well, I'd like to be brutally honest with you here. You are obviously interested in internet radio, and you want to improve your station, understandably. We know what you need to do to get there. But if we wanted to connect with you normally, we might have to advertise on Facebook, or we might have to just hope that you, as somebody who this course is so suitable for, just happens to come across the page, and it might not happen. So we would have to pay to try and connect with you to ensure that this got to the right person. But for right now, because you've chosen to be on the webinar, you've actually taken the time out to do that. We don't have the usual advertising costs. We know that this is right for you, so we know that we're not going after the wrong person. So it really lowers our costs. It makes things an awful lot easier for us. So what we can do is, in terms of giving back to you, and say, well, look, our costs are less. So here, have 50% off. And of course, the 50% off is quite a lot more than actually our cost savings. But it's a nice round figure, and it makes it easy. So what we're doing is we're doing this to incentivize you to get on board, because we think it'll make a genuine difference to you. But like I say, if you feel you don't have the cash to invest, or you're not at that stage yet, no problem. Thank you for attending. Really appreciate it. Use the strategies that you've learned today, okay? And then come back another point. We won't obviously be able to offer the 50% discount, but that is just for people who are watching the webinar, I guess.
Yeah, and I think actually one question has just come in, Steve, is do I have to be a part of the Radio.co network in order to participate in the consulting package?
Well,
now,
what is the situation with that, Mike? I'd be interested to know myself.
No, my feeling would be is if you feel that you can get some benefit from doing a consultancy with one of our radio experts, then you should take that, because I think it's beneficial to anyone that's running their own internet radio station.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I should point out that the actual training, we're not saying, oh, go into your Radio.co dashboard and do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Growing your listener base, apart from the fact, as long as you can see your stats, that's really all you need. Who it's not suitable for, those people who are not passionate about their radio station. They're really not completely that bothered. It's a fly-by-night thing for them. They'll move on to something next week. If that's you, wait until you know whether you're passionate about internet radio or not, because the worst thing in the world for us would be for you to sign up maybe to the consulting thing, and then change your mind, because that's just taking a spot from somebody else. Just like if you sign up using that discount code and you're not really too bothered, you've taken it away from somebody who probably is bothered. Like I say, when we're not doing the webinar, it has to go back up to full price just because we've got our costs back again. We're just reaching out there then, trying to find the right people again. Where right now, you can ask questions, you can figure this out, you can figure if it's right for you or not.
Yeah, and the other point I think it's important to make is that our consultants' time is very limited. It's highly sought after. So we have had to limit the consultancy packages.
Yeah, that's one of the things, isn't it? That the primary thing is helping people get set up with their radio stations, and obviously that gives the team at Radio.co an awful lot of experience as well, which is useful to people. But there's only a limited number of hours then left every day to actually provide that knowledge, and that's why it's a limited commodity, and that's why this isn't something that you find it's going to be $10 from somewhere like ClickBank. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. I
agree. It's something that we. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd be able to give absolutely everybody consultancy, but it is one of those things, and it's like you say, only take the course if it's something that you're passionate about and you really think you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, very much so. Do we have any sort of questions on the material that we've covered? Anything that needs answering?
I think most of the things that are coming through are really about consultancies.
Yes.
Is it possible to purchase the package but hold on using it until I'm all set up with my station? So these are the people that are. Is the course right for people who haven't quite set up their station yet, Steve?
I would say you need to have your station set up first. I would rather be upfront and honest about that. But what I would also say is that, how long is that going to take you to do? And if you start, rather than sort of then starting off the wrong way for the first few weeks in terms of the output that you're putting out there, you're broadcasting. So I'll be thinking about how long is it going to take me to actually physically set it up, and when do I see that I'm going to be seriously sort of putting out some material that I actually care about. And I think that should inform it. I suppose as well, from a commercial point of view, I'd also view it as, if it's going to take me 3 weeks to get up on my feet with this and start putting some shows out, is it worth losing the 50% discount? On the other hand, if you know it's going to take you 6 months, then to me it makes more sense not to bother about the discount and just to decide it's worth paying the 50% extra in 6 months. That just makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
Anyway, it looks. I'm guessing, Mike, that there aren't a huge amount of questions now coming in.
I've been answering the questions that have been coming along. If anyone feels that they've asked the question and it's got lost in kind of all the questions that have been submitted, then feel free to send it over to studio@radio.co and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, and Mike, have you posted the discount link, the discount code, coupon code, should I say, and the course link?
I have. I put both of those in the chat. So, and we'll email this out to people as well.
That's fantastic. Well, what I would suggest we do now is that we wrap up the webinar. I can then get this converted to a video for people who want to watch it at a later date. I'm honestly not sure. I don't know what you guys are doing about honouring the discount code for people who watch the replay.
Well, we've said that the discount code is valid for the next 24 hours. So if you want to get the course with the 50% off, then I would really recommend getting it within the next 24 hours. Yeah.
A practical reason, by the way, for that is that most people who want to take action will by that point. It then allows us to remove the discount code because we've then got to go back to the more traditional forms of reaching out to people to see if this is right for them. So that's why, again, costs kind of have to go up there. I'd always rather be sort of honest and upfront about that kind of thing. I'd like to thank Mike for being my co-presenter today, and Radio.co for giving me the time to come on here and actually talk with you. Regardless of whether you sign up
It's been great.
sign up for the coaching, the consulting, whether you get the course or not. Thank you for attending. Thanks for actually chatting with me. I really appreciate it. It's been good to talk to so many of you. I wish that my mouse pointer hadn't disappeared. It's been a little bit weird for me. But there you go. I think we kind of managed. I managed to get the gist across of my YouTube and Facebook strategies. So like I say, thanks everybody for attending. It's been great to find out a bit more about what you do, why you do it, and who you broadcast to. So with all of that said, I'm now going to try and exit out of the webinar, close it down and convert it into a replay without my mouse pointer. Wish me luck with that. There's quite a chance that we won't actually have a replay of this because of that. So with that saying, guys, I'm going to wrap things up and say goodbye. Thanks a lot for everything, Mike.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's been great.
Bye.
Cheers.